Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, a show about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. I want to speak to 1,000 loiners over the course of what I vaingloriously believe is the most important decade in the history of the human species, and I want to ask those loiners about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it all. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I guess all manner of things. When I was very little, I saw a picture of a glassblower in a book, and I thought that looked really appealing. And then later on, I guess my ambitions sort of evolved according to what I was interested in at the time, but always things to do with writing a lot of the time. An author or a writer of some description.
Yeah, journalist.
Maybe more fiction.
You're listening to Series 3, Episode 4, and my guest, Claudia Wardle. This is another Zoom interview recorded on the 25th of January 2022. Hey up. So, my guest this week is currently in a band, she's writing a novel, and she is a run leader for recovery runners. She also works. Claudia Wardle works in executive search as a headhunter, handling top executive and non-executive high-profile appointments for predominantly UK organisations. Claudia specialises in the public sector and especially higher education. We cover the usual topics, with some diversions into discussing commuting and working while being pregnant. I'm not going to do any call to actions this episode. If you have heard this show before, then you know the drill on those. I will be back briefly at the end.
So what is it that you're doing now then?
Yeah, so now I'm working in executive search, so as a headhunter within the public sector, which is quite interesting. It's not something I'd ever envisaged doing. And to be honest, I wasn't even too sure of its existence until, relatively recently.
Yeah.
But basically I was in academia. So again, when you ask, what did I want to be when I grew up, I guess the answer to that question when I was kind of as of the age of about 16, 17 was very much academia,
Yeah.
working in academia. But I guess I did that for a while. I was doing a PhD. And as much as I really enjoy research and my own research, I took a break because I really wanted to get into the real world, so to speak, and get into actual work kind of thing. And in doing so, I found myself, working in executive search and headhunting. So I'm kind of on the other side of the fence now, and working with academia, and working on kind of high profile appointments for universities and higher education institutions and things like that, rather than being within.
Yeah. So you're kind of keeping contact with that world, but being in a commercial environment.
Exactly.
Yeah. So sort of day to day then, being a headhunter, what are you doing? Are you looking through pages of people's pictures of headshots and saying, we'll have this one? Or how do you do it on a day to day basis?
So basically, between our various clients in the practice, so as I say, I'm specialising at the moment in higher education in that practice within our firm. So within the practice, we have various assignments going on at any one time. So with different clients, it might be new clients or long-standing clients. And so say, for example, a university is looking for a vice chancellor and we're supporting that university in that appointment. I might be working on that one. I might also be working on a professional services role. So these are all sort of executive or non-executive, sort of, as I say, higher profile, more senior positions. So I might be working on sort of 5 assignments at any one time. So I'm speaking to various candidates or potential candidates, going through different profiles, seeing who might be aligned. A lot of it's talking to various different people and understanding their kind of experiences and motivations and whether they're suited. It's quite interesting, really.
And is it quite easy to sort of tempt people? Do you have to kind of, are you literally approaching people and say, have you ever thought of working at this institution rather than that one, and we can offer you more money. I mean, that's how I imagine it being. Am I anywhere near what you're actually doing?
I guess to a degree. I think because of the nature of these sort of appointments and the fact that they're so senior, because again, I've also worked in sort of more government and health and things. Usually the people you're approaching are not every time, but a lot of the time they're already in a position for which the next step would be the one you're talking to them about. So if you're speaking to deputy vice chancellors and people of that nature, the next step for them might naturally be a vice chancellorship. It might not be too out of the blue, but there are so many other sort of factors at play. And when you say, one institution over another, yes, some definitely are more appealing to different people. Sometimes the locations are just, it's very difficult to find people who want to move there. That's what I'm working on at the moment, which I won't disclose, but yeah, the location makes it difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, it depends really. But then sometimes you're going a bit more left field and you're looking for more commercial people for certain roles to be honest, there's no set formula.
Yeah. So what are the things that you like about the job? I mean, how did you get into it and what sort of kept you there?
As I mentioned, I had been in academia for a good while and I was tutoring and lecturing and things, which I do really enjoy, that sort of human interaction side. But a lot of the research I was finding a little, I don't know really, I guess I was feeling a little lonely. And there were other sort of personal factors, I guess. And I just decided I need to take a break from this. So I am technically on a break from academia. But yeah, I mean, we'll see, because getting into this, I think this is possibly a bit of a more suitable career path for me. I basically moved to Leeds because I thought, well, I had been living in York, and I just thought, well, I'd love to stay around Yorkshire. Leeds felt like quite a thriving place, but also not too much of a bustling metropolis, I guess.
Yeah.
And I knew that a lot of businesses were being attracted to Leeds, and there was a lot going on. So I thought, well, I'll move there and get a job. So the first job in this kind of sector that I went into was actually more in the life sciences and biotech space. So it was executive search of sorts, but more in that space because, sorry if this is a bit convoluted, because while I was doing my research masters a few years ago, I did work part-time in sales within life sciences and biotechnology and things. So at least when I got into this sector, I knew, when I got into the executive search space, I knew that sector rather than this kind of operating environment, I guess. And then
you knew all the jargon and lingo as well, so you could,
exactly. So I started off at a smaller boutique firm, and then about a year ago moved to a big firm that's based in London but has a Leeds office. And it's going well. I'm really enjoying it and just seem to have slotted into the public sector really in terms of, consulting for organizations, which I quite like. There's something appealing, I think, about working with the public sector.
So, I mean, in terms of the workload, do you drive the majority of the work, or is it, how does the work come to you? Is it you constantly looking through stuff, being proactive all the time? It kind of sounds like that's the case.
Yeah, so to a degree. So basically, I think in the firm I'm in, as well as in sort of analogous firms, the teams are also sort of structured so people have different roles. So I'm working as a researcher. So I'm doing a lot more of the sort of candidate engagement and that side of things. Whereas, consultants who have been in the role for a lot longer are doing more of the client engagement. And then obviously there are various sort of, I was going to use an Italian word then, various nuances in between. So yeah, but having worked in this for, overall not too long, and having been at the company, I've sort of started as a researcher, and then the plan is to kind of move through to become more client facing and start winning the work rather than
Yeah.
doing a lot of the execution, which is kind of just how these firms are structured and how it works. So
Yeah. Cool. So let's go. We'll start off with talking about the lockdown. So were you in this role before the pandemic, or did you start during the pandemic?
yeah, so I went into this line of work during the pandemic,
Mm.
and then so I got my first job within this during the pandemic, and then I also moved into my current company during the pandemic. So I got 2 jobs during the pandemic.
Did you interview for them both remotely then, I guess? And
Yes,
yeah. So have you, are you back into the office now?
we have been.
Yeah.
Since things are slightly up in the air, or I think, haven't we? Yeah, so at time of recording, we were advised to work from home where possible. I think that rule or piece of advice has just been revoked. So I think we're all going back into the office again, as of sort of next week or the week after. And that'll be as it was previously for a short period, which was for about 2 days a week. So
Yeah.
that true hybrid system of part home working and part office.
Yeah. So did you find that much of a disruption then, sort of, as we went into lockdown and working from home, or did you already have previous experience of sort of working remotely?
Yeah, well, I think having worked in academic research, that's a lot of solitary working. So I was very used to cracking on, focusing. But if anything, I tended to work out and about. So actually working strictly from home was a bit different. But I think I adapted to it quite easily. My partner has also been working from home. So we were both in the same boat and supporting each other, I guess. But we were living in a flat, which was perfectly nice. But I know you can probably see from my background, we've got a far nicer place now. We've bought a house, but we were renting a flat, and it was difficult working off a dining table with cables all over the show. And
Did you both work at the same time and that kind of worked all right? Or was it like, right, you work these hours and I'll work these hours and because we need to work separately, or did it work out okay?
it worked out okay. You do hear of people at each other's throats and needing to separate into different rooms, but we've been fine, actually.
Good. Yeah. So it sounds like it was, not a major kind of disruption for you. I mean, are you looking forward to going back into the office? I say in terms of not being a major disruption, but it was kind of like you're working from home, you're used to working from home. It was kind of like just get on with it and kind of wait until you can go back into the office. Was that the case?
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
so. And the other thing is, in terms of a full-time commercial role, I hadn't been in one before. So actually,
Yeah.
this is all I've known. Working in academia, sort of in a research capacity, and then giving the odd lecture and things, that wasn't full-time work. That's study with some work. My actual full-time commercial working career has only ever been kind of this hybrid model, either full-time home working but yeah, 5 days a week in an office is something I've never known, and I wonder if I'll ever know.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be interesting. And if you do it, what you'll think of it. It's like, I've spent
Yeah.
5 days in this office. That's strange. We'll go from COVID to Brexit. So has Brexit affected what you do? And, can you tell? Because when I've asked this question before, people have just sort of like, well, it's hard to tell what Brexit's doing and what COVID's doing. So can you see any kind of like discernible effects on your work from Brexit? Or again, is it something you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell because you started this role after we'd Brexited?
Yes. As you say, I had entered this sort of work after we had Brexited. I like how you put it. In which case, I can't necessarily draw on any measurables or discernible metrics to sort of to sort of map what's changed. But I can at least say that in my previous company, we worked a lot with European countries. So in that job, I was actually, well, I was about to say targeting, maybe not quite as very sales speak.
Yeah.
I was, I had clients who were sort of in Germany, or, various other, particularly Germany, it just so happened, but in other European countries. And that didn't seem to be an issue. There didn't seem to be any barrier whatsoever. And when I say Europe, obviously, I mean countries in the European Union, which of course not all European countries are. Whereas in this role, albeit that our firm is international, we are quite UK focused. So I'm really working with UK institutions in the main. And for that reason, I wouldn't say that for me personally, there's too much of an impact to be discerned.
I mean, is it creating any more work? Because I mean, the employment landscape in academia is very okay. There's probably areas where it needs to be more diverse, but it's quite diverse in terms of there are people from all over the world who are teaching in the UK. And a lot of those people will have been from EU 27, and some of them will have gone home or will have thought again about staying in the UK, or they'll have got citizenship or a variety of things. Is there any, what am I trying to ask here? Is there any discernible change? And I'm thinking of something else, but I think do you notice any change in the kind of makeup of people that you're trying to attract or people that you're trying to get? Or is it more like you have to focus on more UK based people because there's more complications with paperwork when someone wants to move between institutions? Like, how's it looking?
Yeah, I understand. So, just working across speaking for the wider public sector, I suppose, working with the NHS in those very senior positions, usually those were people who were already in the British health system. So I didn't notice too much of it there. In higher education, I would say a lot of the time, there have actually been recent appointments of more high-profile figures within UK higher education institutions who are from EU countries. So that's definitely not posed a problem, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, when you get into the fundamentals and nitty-gritty, there were any issues there, I'm not too sure because I didn't personally handle those. A lot of the time, we do speak to, potential candidates in European countries, but it's sort of in the same way that we speak to Australians, for example, because the Australian higher education system is quite akin to ours. So in fact, maybe Australia would be even more natural a place to go in search of people for some of these sorts of position. Likewise, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop us approaching anybody. If anything, it's been the COVID pandemic which has caused more disruption with people feeling like they're stranded or what have you. And that's actually been more of an issue, I think, with far further afield locations.
All right, then. So we have a question. Well, I have a question on climate change. Is that something that's a concern for you in your work? Is it something that comes up in your work? And is there anything that you can do with your work that's kind of addressing or alleviating or working on climate change?
I think in other practices within our firm, as I say, so those working more in maybe the industrial practice and what have you with those sorts of clients, they would have a completely different, although they do the same job as me, they would probably have a completely different answer for you. Whereas working in higher education, possibly it's from a sort of different angle. So definitely a lot of the clients you work with are driving research and driving change around environmental issues and those related to climate change. From a firm perspective, definitely definitely my firm, like a lot of others, have, measures in place and, strategic objectives
Mm.
surrounding environmental consciousness. So I think there are definitely things going on, even this probably just sounds kind of generic, but, cutting down on using paper. We're going completely paperless, for example,
Mm.
and those sorts of things. So probably just in those regards. I
Yeah.
don't think my job really touches on climate change in the same way that, I don't know, my brother's does, for example, who works as an air quality consultant. So he literally
Yeah.
works within kind of environmental sciences.
There wouldn't necessarily have been, well, I guess I'm asking this, so like, would in that industry, in even in the business, would they have been doing travel to meet people before, or travel, like as part of the process of like trying to attract people? Would there be face-to-face meetings, and that's kind of been replaced by all the remote sort of working stuff? Is that?
Yes, definitely. So, business development meetings with clients would often be face to face. Obviously, those couldn't be anymore. And I think a lot of the time, with those being often over a coffee or lunch, that does make things a little bit more difficult, because I suppose a lot of business development, the more kind of organic and authentic it can be, the better, I guess,
Mm.
which isn't the case really with logging onto a Zoom call, I guess. Well, it can be. I mean, our conversation right now is authentic and organic because we know what we're doing. There's probably not a
Yeah.
huge difference conducting this over Zoom. But I suppose maybe with a business development meeting, in some ways, possibly some of the art is taken away by being
Yeah.
virtual. Not sure. Then client meetings in general, those are often those were often face to face, and a lot of those went virtual, but we're gradually going back to
Yeah.
face to face. Preliminary interviews of candidates, which our firm conducts at the time, and kind of psychometric testing and things, those were, I think, usually face to face, but can be done over Zoom. So, for example, in that instance, I think it's been a real aid, because sometimes I guess it's not necessary to actually conduct some of these things in person.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the same with the sort of final panels, at various organizations or companies. I suppose a lot of those then had to go online, but again, they're returning to in the flesh.
Mm. Is that just, do you think that's just force of habit? I mean, all organizations have had long enough in terms of people returning to the office to decide, the value of being in the office versus not being in the office, and the savings, the cost benefit analysis of that. Like, do you think you'll remain kind of hybrid working, where you sort of, you kind of just come into the office when you need to, or do you think it'll be in the office sort of regularly because they want everyone there and they want them working together?
No, I think definitely hybrid. So, as I mentioned, my firm is headquartered in London. So my
Mm.
team, apart from one partner, everybody else is actually based in London.
Mm.
And he's kind of on the road a lot more than I am due to the nature of his role. So actually, when I'm in the Leeds office, it's a lovely environment. It's great because we're a small office, because we're sort of a satellite office for a London-based firm. But the people who were there with me, they're colleagues, but they're actually in a sister business, or they work in a different area. So
Yeah.
we're not collaborating anyway. It's more for the social side,
Yeah.
which is nice. So I go there sort of twice a week, which I really enjoy. And then when I'm working with my team, I go down to London, say every 2 weeks, which works for me really well.
Yeah.
Because then I can stay overnight and maybe do something social with the team as well. But to be honest with you, personally, I would actually prefer more interaction with direct colleagues and more collaboration, because sometimes I don't feel that Zoom or Teams, whilst it really does have its benefits in some ways, for sure, I don't feel that sometimes it really does conduce to proper, I don't know, imaginative thinking or creative collaboration, which I think is great for work output and results and innovation, but it's also really good on a personal level. So I like that
Yeah.
kind of stimulation with other people. I know other people,
Yeah.
some people aren't like that so much, but I am, and I think I do miss out on that a little. But then the benefits also balance a lot of that out. So I don't know if I think I did mention to you, I'm actually currently pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and due in May. So, well, firstly, I'll be on parental leave, which I'll share with my partner, so do a few months each. But I think after that, having a young child within this new hybrid working environment is going to be a lot better for me than
Yeah.
how it would have been before.
Yeah.
Having to be in the office from this time until this time without the flexibility.
Yeah.
So I guess all of these things, there can be a bit of a trade-off.
Hmm. Do you think there'll be a possibility as well? Well, congratulations as well.
Thank you.
Do you think there'll be a possibility though of the scenario of like you'll have a screaming baby and a Zoom call to do at the same time, and it's like you might have just had the screaming baby if you'd been on maternal leave in a different kind of context? I don't know.
Maybe. We'll see.
Hopefully it'll be the best version of that. Well, I think as well that you brought up an interesting point there in terms of the working on your own. Like, so I'm sort of working on this, but I'm working essentially on my own. And that, saying going into the office and having that kind of collegiate environment, the social environment and social aspect there. Like, I do think it helps to have, you don't necessarily have to have a collaborator, but it helps to have other people working around you, and they don't even necessarily to be, necessarily need to be working on the same thing. And like, I can understand the idea of co-working. I mean, there's something in there in terms of that benefit of being in an office with other people and being able to work with them. I mean, it doesn't always have to be directly the benefit of them sort of giving you a lead or giving you some information. It can be, sort of grapevine information where someone tells you something and you go, oh, I know someone who's doing something else on that. You should speak to them. Those kind of opportunities. I don't think I've got a question here, so I'm just going to get you to speak on that if you've got anything to add.
No, definitely. I completely agree with you. It's that sort of intelligence that's easier to share when you're all together, and it's more organically shared than dropping somebody an email. Definitely. But in terms of efficiency, perhaps it is better in the virtual way. But definitely, as you're saying, it's that sort of vital intelligence sharing and an idea exchange. That's what's missing to a degree from hybrid working. But at the same time, it's good for me as well that I can work around other people with whom I'm not necessarily directly working on something for the reasons you said, the sort of co-working environment. And actually, going to see my team every 2 weeks or whatever in London, that's probably enough.
On Zoom.
Oh no, we're frozen.
Hello. Oh, you're back.
Oh no.
You
Everything
froze
okay?
them for a bit. Yeah, you froze them for a bit. I can't remember. It's really awful when that happens because the immediate thing you do is you panic. You're like, where have they gone? Well, what I should be doing is remembering what you were saying for when you come back and be certain that you are going to come back. But I have no faith in the technology. So I can't remember where we got up to, how much you got into that, but you were talking about basically spontaneity and the way of working. Should we move on to another question?
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm not going to be able to pick that up again.
No, it's fine. I think enough's been said.
Okay. So we've done Brexit and COVID. I'll do a quick sort of round on social media. How much does social media sort of affect your work? Do you have to be on social media for work? Do you have to do your own social media work? Like, how much is it a part of your role?
So, although there are many companies who work within the sort of, talent space, who rely on LinkedIn quite a lot for messaging people and what have you. I think because we work at a certain level, a lot of our potential candidates and contacts and everything are usually people who are known to us, but they're not always. So I think in addition to various other kind of resources that we use, we do also make use of LinkedIn, with it being a professional social media platform. So yeah, on the odd occasion, well, more than the odd occasion, some correspondence is conducted on LinkedIn. For example, if you don't have an email address for somebody, it's the best way to pop them a message. So yeah, it does factor, but only LinkedIn for work. I don't really use other social media for my work. I do for hobbies. So I've got various side projects, which, although they're not paid, I guess are technically work. So I might use other social media platforms. But yeah, for my full-time paid work, it's really just LinkedIn, I would say.
I mean, so I would say that LinkedIn's really kind of come up in the world the last few years. I mean, even though it's been around forever, it's sort of like now people are kind of actually using it as a social media platform. I mean, it must be great in your line of work just to have essentially the majority of people there, because I can't imagine, like, how often do you come across people that you're researching who aren't on LinkedIn in this field?
Yeah, not too often. But then a lot of people also don't update their LinkedIn profile too well. And I think if people are non-executive directors with like portfolio careers or something, sitting on various boards, maybe they're a certain age, they probably aren't using it. But yeah, you're right. It's a valuable tool that it wouldn't make sense to ignore.
Yeah. So if there was a universal basic income, so basically if you were being paid enough money to live and you pay the majority of your bills, would you still work? And if you were still working, would you be in the same job, or would you change certain things of it, of like, I'd only do 3 days? Like, what do you think you would do?
I understand that this is supposed to be a fun question, but I really need to understand the concrete
intricacies of
kind of
work.
detail of how this would work. So in this scenario, would everybody be on this same
Everybody's
income?
getting basic income, so like the citizens' income, like Green Party you're on about.
Yeah. And then additional work is sort of optional for people if they so wish.
Well, so the idea is to, as everyone's part of the society, they get a stipend of like, here's some money to live in this society. And then that money obviously is spent back into the system because it's been paid in, tax tokens. So we can pay any tax on it. And then you would do any additional work that was needed. So when they piloted this, they found that things like, people will work, or they'll work a bit less and have more time off. But because people don't have to work, they're less stressed out, they feel happier, they feel healthier, they have more time for things like accidents and making sure they don't have all of these kind of positive benefits. But then you get into the whole discussion of who's going to pay for it, how's it going to be paid for, and then all the economists argue about what money is and what's real and what's not real. And but yeah, it is, like you say, it's supposed to be a fun question of, if you didn't have to work,
Yeah, I get you. Well, this is interesting because this is where some of my slightly more left-leaning tendencies start to rear their head, and I start thinking about all the benefits of a society of that nature. But rather than get into that, I'll answer the question. Yes, I would still work. Obviously, the nature of the work and the clients and things would all be dependent on this system, I guess. I wonder how universities would operate or what have you. But yes, I'd still work. In that scenario, I would possibly do something differently or split my time differently. So, for example, I'm currently writing a novel. In the scenario you've posited, probably more of this novel would have been written by now. Or maybe I would have kept up with a bit more of my academic research and been able to balance that a bit more easily. So probably in that instance, I would look more at balance between a few different projects, which I am still currently doing, but obviously the paid work takes up such a huge amount of time,
Mm.
that it can be difficult. And some of these projects, you can't put quite the time into them that you would, or you end up, your diary's chock-a-block, which is fun. Probably I would just approach things a bit differently and split time between things in the way that I wanted to in that way.
Are you quite good with your time management? Are you do you feel that you're kind of, I know how to organize my time?
Yes. I am actually very good at that.
Yeah.
I like to fill time with lots of different things. So I'll schedule, so I've scheduled this in to my work day, then I'll schedule in, time to go to the gym, or so I'm also part of this not-for-profit, which is a running community, working with people who are recovering from kind of various mental health, or mental ill health or physical ill health or various things like that. And we're sort of trying to grow the organization and, get charitable status. It's really still its nascent stages. So there's that, and then I'm in a band. I'm also trying to do this, get this novel kind of done in its own time, obviously, because you can't force these things. So, and obviously, I spend a lot of time with my partner, and I think because of all the things I like to fill my time with, I then have to be very, very disciplined.
But you kind of are anyway. Do you think it would just give you loads more stuff to do? Would it just mean more scheduling for you?
Yeah, maybe.
You've got all these windows and I have to fill this time, I'll have to fill this time.
Yeah, true. Might be too much.
But then, you could go the other way and people will quite easily, if you give them the opportunity, people will fill your time up as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that. So you'd basically stay in the same sort of way. I mean, as I've asked this question, when I've asked this question before I started doing this, the general answer that people would give me was sort of either go traveling or study again. But I suppose because this is a work kind of context thing, everyone's thinking about work and whether they'd be in work or not. I mean, I don't know. I think I might study first. Might be the path that I go down, go back to uni and do sort of the next thing. But yeah, it would be nice to have, but it's not happening yet. So, so if you could change anything about your role, carte blanche, you can change whatever you want. So what 3 things would you change about the role?
I should pay myself more money.
Okay.
I'm sure is that what a lot of people say? I don't know.
Quite often.
Why not? You would, obviously. No, it's a terrible thing to say, especially first.
It's an honest thing to say.
Yeah. I'm not sure what else really. I quite enjoy it. And the other thing is, I've been in this line of work for maybe coming up to 2 years, but only a year in my current company. I feel like I'm still, to a degree, finding my feet.
Yeah.
Well, I found my feet, but I'm still kind of in this. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to, because you could always say something like, "Oh, what I would change is I would already have moved up the rungs, and gained all of this experience." But actually, without patience, dedication, and faith, and various other virtues, which is the reality of the world, without these, really, you can't attain, a higher status or all of this experience and become, so actually you just have to put in the time, don't you really?
Yeah.
And everything.
You can't do it by osmosis. You have to actually spend time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously, your salary increase comes with that and all that sort of stuff. So, I'm going to say I wouldn't really change much. I'll just give it its time and put the work in and see what happens with the career.
I mean, it sounds very much like you're kind of curious with this sector, with this industry, and you just kind of let's see where this goes. You sound, nothing seems to be kind of putting you off it. You're not kind of, I don't like this or I don't like that or this has been difficult. It's just kind of, oh, this is all interesting. So that's the impression that I get from what you've said. Is that fair? This is oh, this is all interesting and new, and there's things to learn here. Is that
Yeah.
sort of, yeah.
I think that does summarize it. Thank you. And actually, in your sort of marketing for this podcast, I've seen you say, come and talk to me, sort of reframe your ideas of work and think about it in a different way, or through the prism that you present to the guest through which to view their work. And actually, I suppose that is what we're doing. And ultimately, when it comes to it, yes, I think that is very fair to say. I've been doing this now for a bit of time, so I can definitely make an assessment of it. But likewise, it does need more time. And I think it is fair to say that I'm full of sort of curiosity and intrigue and want to give it a fair crack and sort of see how it goes. And thankfully, this day and age as well, you can have a child and that doesn't disrupt anything,
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So you yeah. I mean, do you think that they said, it seems like an organization that's going to look after its staff as well? So do you get that kind of vibe of that, they're not trying to do one over on you. They want to keep you sweet as much as you want to keep their clients sweet. Is that the sort of range?
Yeah, I'd say it's like that. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, a big corporation is a big corporation. There's no point pretending it's not. But yeah, there's definitely some that are better than others, I think. And yeah, this is a good one.
So, I mean, I've got sort of a question on the future. I mean, we've gone through this pretty quick.
Oh, right. Sorry.
No.
Was I it's too conclusive?
You're very concise. So what was I going to say then? Yeah. So in terms of future, I mean, like, obviously I don't want to put you in a position where you're like, oh, here's my 5-year plan. And, I want my boss to promote me at this point and they better give me, I don't want to give away your working secrets or whatever, but it sounds like you're going to be here for the next sort of few years, and potentially as well, sounds like this is something that you could consider making a career of, from what you said. I mean, obviously you've got all these other projects on as well. So say you get the novel done and that takes off. I mean, this is a bit like the UBI question, or your band records a hit song. Is it follow that path? I mean, would that put you in a bit of a quandary, or like, well, I'm enjoying this job and I don't know if there's any future in these creative avenues that I've had a brief success in. Do you think that would derail you and you'd want to go down those routes? Or do you think you'd be kind of, no, I have to follow the sensible path and keep working and that's all bonus?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It would really depend, but I think with everything, balance is quite key. So yeah, it would really have to depend. It would really depend. It's such a difficult question. But I am really enjoying what I'm doing. I would really like to make a proper career of it. Also, the genre that my band plays is so niche that I don't think that it's going to explode in any real way.
Yeah, you never know. Anything can happen.
No, exactly. But in some ways, I would reevaluate. I mean, I think it's important too to reevaluate, not in some sort of neurotic perpetual cycle, but definitely to evaluate your life on a sort of somewhat regular basis, in terms of gratitude, particularly, first and foremost, I guess, and then sort of personal kind of adherence to kind of your own integrity, I guess. Are you being the best? Sorry to sound sort of
we have
or something,
phrases we have, yeah.
Yeah, but I think evaluating your life and what you're putting in, what you're getting out, and all of these things have to be weighed up, because as much as I made the joke about what would you change about your job? Oh, just increase the salary. As much as I made that joke, and there is obviously truth in it. At the same time, money is not everything, and as I suppose was kind of at the root of your question about the UBI, if you can get by financially and you're absolutely fine, that's what matters. I mean, there are people in this world who are clearly desperate for as much money as they can get, and that's fine. I wouldn't judge anyone for that. And, I'm hoping that my career, becomes more, even more lucrative, as I progress with it. But at the same time, that's not my ultimate ambition. It's much more important to me that my family's health, for example, or my relationship with my partner, and then the baby that we have, and balancing these things and making sure that that I suppose you're doing your best, not only for yourself but those close to you, rather than prizing financial gain above everything else. So yeah, this is getting quite deep.
Well, no, I mean, it kind of should in some ways. I mean, we spend the majority of our life in work, and we spend so little time talking about it. We'll spend more time talking about something that's in the news of people we'll never meet than we do talking about something we do every day. And the extent of the conversation that we quite often have with work is, you meet your friends and they're like, how's work? And you go, it's like this. And then you might have a bitch about a particular thing, but that's kind of it. And then you go out with work colleagues and you'll talk about work for a bit, and then you're trying to kind of divert onto something else because it's like, well, we're at work all day. So it seems like we spend a lot of time trying not to talk about work and what we spend all our time doing, which I think is a little bit weird.
Yeah, you're right. That's why I think this podcast is fascinating, and I was quite keen to come and speak, because it is really interesting. Even just the idea of a commute. A lot of people spend a lot of time commuting, or I think I've even thought it might be interesting to, host at some point some kind of exhibition or something of, I don't know if it's photography or something, just of the commute, that what that is captured, in visual form, or something of what that even means to people, whether it's, no commute or whatever, whether, I don't know, it's the juxtaposition of, the alarm going off at 5:30 or something and somebody getting onto a cramped train versus maybe what it has been over, the whole pandemic period and the lockdowns, which probably looks a lot more like somebody kind of rolling out of bed at 8:30 or something to get ready for 9, like downstairs on the, I don't know. But you're right, these are all things that people spend a lot of time doing, or they become ingrained, and actually, yeah, people are avoiding talking about work because, well, lots of the time as well, people, it goes over everyone else's head because you're doing something that's just so different. So unless you sort of take the time to break it down, it's difficult to understand. And I suppose people feel that other people might not be too interested in what they do, or there's all kinds of reasons, I guess.
It's like, so I've talked to, sort of talking to creative people. So I was talking to someone who worked in TV, and they were talking about how, when you tell people that you work in TV, most jobs, you tell people what you do, they're like, unless it sounds like you earn loads of money. And then if you tell people you work in TV, like in theatre, not so much. TV, film, people will be like, really? And they're really interesting. It's like, well, I'm just a secretary on whatever. Like, I only do it. But it's still interesting because you're in that sector. What is the point of this? Why am I saying this? I do think it's interesting how we assess these jobs as well. So it's kind of, we ask people what they do all the time, and the majority of the time, you don't know what they'll tell you, but it's like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that does. Like, I don't know what your day to day is. Are you sat in an office, or are you in a factory, or are you in a field, or?
Yeah. No, it's true. But also the very nature of the question, what do you do? Why should that necessarily be answered by what do you get paid for? Because, a lot of people are working, and you do enjoy what you do, of course, but ultimately, for the vast majority of people, you're doing that to earn money for other things. So you make the best of it, don't you? You make what you can out of it, and you try to tie other things into it and do your best and derive, a lot of self-worth from it and things like that. But at the same time, what do you do as a question kind of in your life? Well, should the answer to that maybe be more, should the answer to that be more aligned to a question like, what do you do in your life that you feel is representative of you?
Yeah.
Or what do you do that really reflects the true essence of you? Or
Yeah. What are you
something. I
most
don't know.
proud of, or what are you? Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
those what's your best achievements kind of thing. It's a difficult one to kind of ask. I mean, it's most of these things are just the habits, aren't they? Like asking people, "How do you do?" and "Good morning."
Yeah.
Like, "Are you all right?" And then most of the time, people don't want to know the answer to that question, and most of the time, people are like, "I'm fine. How are you?" Things like that. You don't want someone to respond with like, "Everything's wonderful and I'm going to tell you why," or "Everything's terrible and I'm going to tell you why."
No.
You're just being polite most of the time. There's something else that there's definitely another. Oh, so this was one thing that I thought about while we were talking. So I haven't asked about this for a while, but it was, if you remember, for a period of time, maybe between lockdowns, there was a huge big thing about workplace well-being and all of the well-being stuff. Now you've got a lot of kind of extracurricular activities, for want of a better phrase. So are all of these things, and you said as well earlier when we were discussing, that's work as well, work on the band, work on your book, work on the other areas outside of work. How do you sort of distinguish them? Are they still work, but one's work pleasure? And would it disrupt things if you were getting paid for everything? Would you just feel like you were overworking? Like, how do you keep them as being, downtime, relaxation?
Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose the more involved in something that you get, and the more that you are putting time and structured time with specific goals into a hobby, the more that it's like work, and the more likely it is to give you a little bit more pressure rather than feeling like downtime. But at the same time, I would say the rewards are also greater. So, for example, recovery runners, the running community that I'm in, which, as I mentioned, is for kind of, it promotes mental health through running, basically, and we're going for this charitable status, and that's becoming, as I'm on the committee, and as that evolves into something greater than just turning up and running. I've qualified as a run leader, so I've had to go through that training. But then I'm getting more out of it because I can lead people. For example, while I'm pregnant, I can't run the distances I was doing, or maybe I could do, but I'm choosing to just do shorter distances. So I'm leading a Couch to 5K program at the moment, which I've dragged my partner on, actually. So although I'm putting more work into that, it's less like downtime. So Sunday mornings, rather than turning up like I was doing, I fancy turning up, so on my time, I'm going to rock up. Instead, I have to be there. People are I'm beholden unto this group. So yes, it does feel less like downtime, but I'm doing something for people, and I'm also getting something from it myself. The whole question of, I guess, is there such thing as a truly, philanthropic, selfless act? And the same with the band. If it's not just jamming, if it's more, right, we're recording, we need to schedule time, then we've got gigs. So yes, it is more of a work, sort of, it has more of an aspect of work, and it's less downtime. But again, you have real creative output. So again, that outweighs maybe the lack of relaxation or something like that. So ultimately, how do I keep these as sort of downtime or hobbies? I don't really, because I end up taking things too seriously and putting too much into them. But then for downtime, that's what reading and Netflix and things are for, and going out for dinner. Anyway, I don't know. I suppose if we had this conversation in a year's time, when this baby will be, I don't know how old. This is obviously a first child, so it's completely novel to me. Maybe I'll be a bit different, and I'll be saying, "Oh, there's no time for anything." I don't know. Maybe things will change. Maybe
Or
they'll
maybe you'll be
slow
like,
down.
I never want to work again. I'm just going to spend all my time with children.
Oh, yeah, imagine. I don't think so, but yeah, you never know. You never know.
No, you don't. No. Yeah. I was gonna sort of go into kind of the actual work satisfaction. So I was thinking about as you were talking then, as I was also listening, was so this has come up before when as I've been doing these interviews of like toil and labor and what is work, what makes it work for you. I mean, is it the getting paid, and do you take on these other activities to give you the variety or the struggle or the various bits that you need? And with your role, if you can talk a little bit about like where does the satisfaction come from? Is it sort of getting someone into a role, and like how do you know what you've done through the day? Is it just a sort of email trail, or like, because there's a thing when you're working in offices, I've done a lot of office jobs, and you're there all day. You don't really feel like you've done anything. You don't know what you've done. You know you've done things, but it's kind of like, what did I achieve? I don't know. I sent emails and stuff. So having that, I moved this much earth from here to there, you've done that, and you can be proud that here's the results of my labor. So how do you get the job satisfaction, and what do you think what are the things that make something work?
Yes, I really enjoy having these quite pivotal conversations with people, whether that be, well, it's more enjoyable to discuss a role with somebody who hadn't been thinking about it. And obviously, suddenly it's the first step to changing someone's life in many ways. Somebody's working in a certain role, I mean, obviously for these roles, it'll be quite a senior one. But they might move into, because given that, as I say, we work on sort of these vice chancellorships, CEOs, these are the work that we do and the appointments we make a big difference, because, these are government agencies, or these are, huge charities, or, big universities. So firstly, you're making whomever we are appointing into the position, there's a great impact on lots of people's lives.
Largely steering the ship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that firstly gives lots of satisfaction. Secondly, it's having those conversations and sort of changing somebody's life. Suddenly they're saying to their family that night, right, this opportunity has arisen, let's discuss this. So that's good. So there's all that side of things, which is sort of external to you, that you've been very instrumental in, which is nice. There's also just the conversations with people. I find it fascinating to talk to so many different types of person about different things. Talking to an executive director of corporate services, for example, it is, quite different to talking to a medical director or a hospital, or what have you. So that variety is really interesting. I enjoy that. And then just, as you say, when you can measure things, and you have like sort of tangible evidence. So obviously we do sort of weekly reports and things like that. And actually, when you can submit something to your colleagues, in my case, as a researcher, to the consultant on the assignment, and say, look at this really good, list of people that, I've creatively found, or, and then, when we get to long list and there's a good long list there, and it's all that sort of thing, really. It's just seeing that you've achieved what you should have. And sometimes the harder that is to achieve, the more interesting. I've worked on a couple of things which have been so difficult, and I actually I would rather the balance is good. I wouldn't want to work on exclusively difficult assignments, but yeah, sometimes that gives you a real sense of achievements. I think I derive job satisfaction through a few channels, really. Because you have to as well, otherwise you'd just be.
Yeah, and you get you take. I mean, I don't know if this is true for you as well, but I always find you take sort of little pleasures out of random small things or random tasks that you do in a day, of like part of a good work day could be, you know, every Monday you go down to reception and you see so-and-so for 5 minutes. It's like, that can be part of your routine.
You're right. I think I don't talk a lot about colleagues so much, and I think that's very indicative of the way of the world at the moment. I think this would have been very different. This would have been a very different conversation if it had been 5 years ago. I'd probably be talking a lot more about my time with colleagues, maybe, rather than how I'm talking. So instead, for example, there's somebody who works at my company, so she's in a completely different sort of function. She's a business analyst. I get on really well with her. I think it's partly because we actually were onboarded, great term, at the same time. So I sort of knew her virtually. And then she's at the main office in London. So when I'm down there, we've been for lunch a couple of times. And actually, that's given me great satisfaction because she works in a completely different sort of area. And actually, we've just enjoyed a long lunch and discussed things. And it's just been a real pleasure. But actually, funnily enough, I'm doing an extra job alongside my main job, which is to work on the product team. So I'm actually doing quite technical roles in the company as well. But I won't get into that because it just opens a whole other can of worms. But aside from that, we're in sort of two different roles. And yeah, so that's definitely an example of the kind of colleague sort of fun. And obviously we have socials. And the beauty of it is I have socials in Leeds in our smaller office and the social side of things with the London lot. So, but yeah, I just noticed when I was talking, my answers to a lot of your questions don't really tend to revolve around colleagues. They revolve around the specific job.
I think that was a really interesting, insight that, you know, because I did a couple of interviews before we went into lockdown. And then I was really stupid for ages and didn't think of Zoom or, you know, recording remotely. I was like, I can't do it anymore. I can't go to people's houses. And then, the penny drops. But nobody's made that point. And it's a point that's not necessarily occurred to me either. People do talk about colleagues like occasionally, but I think you're right. It could be a very, very different conversation 5 years ago. It could be much more about, oh, well, and I work alongside so-and-so and we do this and we do that. And, colleagues would definitely be more present in the mind. Whereas now they're less present because we're all working from home. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Any other thoughts, any other areas that you've thought about in this domain?
I'm not sure, really. I think I do find the whole idea of commuting in general, just commutes, I find quite a fascinating sort of topic. I think obviously because working in the field that I do and discussing, potential opportunities with people, these real logistical things to do with work, I think are very interesting. And there's a lot more to be discussed around them now that the world is a lot more flexible and hybridized and what have you. Whereas before, perhaps there was more of a mentality which was, I don't know, people just conforming to these strict hours and a place to be, almost like factory working or something, but just translated into an office. Whereas now, I suppose people feel they've got more options. They know that they could move to different companies and have work-life balance, as people like to term it, that could fit their preferences better. I just think maybe perhaps these logistical considerations can come to the fore a bit more these days. People can decide, or perhaps people want to commute. Well, for example, if I go to London every couple of weeks, that works well in this modern way, this contemporary post 2019 world. But who knows whether I would have been brought on in my company, in the team that I am doing and things, in the role that I'm doing in the Leeds office without this virtual connectivity between everybody and then going down to London every 2 weeks. I don't know whether I would have been, because I don't think that maybe the firm or any other firm obviously would have been prepared for somebody to do that. I would have been too isolated, and
Yeah.
perhaps it just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Whereas now I was able to work for this company quite easily because it's fine for me to work from Leeds, connect with people virtually, and then go down every couple of weeks and connect physically. So there is that. But I think I'm not the only person to like reap the benefits of the modern age. I think people might be more likely to commute further because they're only commuting 2 days a week, or they might decide, actually, I've wasted so much of my life commuting 2 hours every day. I'm no longer going to stay in this job. I'm getting a job closer to home. I don't know. I think it could be all manner of decisions, I think, have been made. Look at all the people who've had sheds and shacks in the back of their gardens connected with super fast Wi-Fi and electricity, and had these whole places converted. I don't know, so that they can. Well, those sorts of people aren't going to suddenly go back to a 9-to-5 job within an office or something, and then not make use of that. So I don't know. I just think people have taken back control over their own lives a bit more, and perhaps can have more to leverage. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's harder. It's harder for people to make excuses like, "Oh, well, you can't work from home," because it's like, well, we all just did. Or you can't do this. It's like, well, we just did that, but things can't. Yeah. When you've stopped everything and said all the rules don't matter, you can't then go back to like, oh, all the rules do matter now.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult.
Yeah. And it would be interesting to know, because obviously without, naming names, I'm aware of a particular company that's national and big. And from what I've heard from kind of a friend of a friend, or the wife of a friend, they seem to be quite archaic in their approach. It's almost quite surprising. And that can't be the only company. I'm sure there are companies which are a bit more, I don't know, cracking the whip and forcing people. Probably companies which already exercise what would be considered by many, and by me probably, to be kind of very archaic sort of working practices anyway, enforced on employees. So there must still be companies operating like that in spite of everything that's happened.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're not going to up their game, are they? They're not going to,
No.
well, we better try harder and pay people more and treat them better. It's like, no, we're still in business. Do things worse.
Exactly. But then at the same time, my firm, my partner's firm, my immediate experience of companies is kind of those two, I guess. And actually, we have quite a lot of flexibility, and this. But I do have to remind myself, like, that can't necessarily be the norm. There could well be, as you say, companies just cracking the whip, or a lot of companies never let people go home in the first place. There are probably people who were really worried about their health or their loved ones, especially when things weren't. I mean, that's the other thing, which I guess we haven't even really talked about too much, is just people in general and their approaches to COVID and their fears or their lack thereof. People's attitudes differ so vastly. I think it's good when a company can take those into account. That some people want to be in the office and like the interaction, whereas other people have been scared of contracting the virus or what have you. And I guess everyone's entitled to their own.
Try and be safe.
Yeah.
If you can be on this planet.
Yeah.
I was listening today, they were talking again about this great wave of people leaving work, sort of more especially in the US. And like, oh, it's a big problem because people are leaving work. And like we've had, we had with the HGV drivers the other year and so on. And most of the time, like, there'll be loads of people going, oh, we can't get staff. And my first question is like, have you thought about paying people more? Like, have you thought about offering higher wages and you might get more people? But I think there's a like, outside of sort of straightforward, just kind of hiring people, I do think there's a whole, this is an area that we could go into. So I think there's a whole thing with recruitment And I think a lot of the recruitment process is just really not fit for purpose at all. Because I've seen plenty of places, like that find it really hard to get candidates, and then their candidates will leave straight away. And like the whole process is slow and clunky, and it's supposed to provide these like reassurances and it's supposed to have checks and balances in it, that you're actually hiring the person that you want for the JD that you want, and that the job description is supposed to actually describe the job. All the time, so much of that doesn't work. So you're in, like, I imagine as well, part of your role is that you are using some of these recruitment software tools and things like that. So and sales stuff as well, are you using any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so Salesforce, for example. So some of those tools, definitely. But I think that's exactly it. This is, I think, what you've just described is part of the reason that many organizations want to use a professional executive search firm for their high profile top
to get people
hires
that are right and that will stay. Yeah,
exactly. But I think you're right, for plenty of businesses, hiring, even sort of mid-level staff or what have you, or entry level, any other kind of level, I guess either a lot of them probably aren't doing a particularly good job of advertising the roles or targeting the right people, or maybe they're using agencies which aren't really fit for purpose. But I see what you mean. And then again, as well as recruiting staff, which is difficult at the moment, because you say there are a lot of jobs and people are being far more choosy and selective. There's also the matter of staff retention, I guess, too, because again, if people think, well, actually, I could go to a similar company where I feel like I'm going to be treated better, then they will go. So it's, what do you do? Whether it's, you need to look at your salaries, or you need to look at a lot of other policies. I think plenty of companies could do with really picking apart their policies properly and doing better.
Mm.
Yeah.
So have you become totally fluent in, like recruitment jargon and sales jargon as well through this role? Or like how many, and have you had to learn sort of about different industry? I mean, because now you were recruiting in sort of a more science area before, weren't you? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it like other sales jobs where you kind of have to learn a little bit about the role and the profession and the area that they're looking after? So like, are you constantly learning stuff through that as well?
Yeah, certainly. So I think ultimately with what I'm doing now, given that it's all leadership roles and it's all kind of executive leadership, or it's non-executive board roles, obviously all these roles are not the same. They require kind of different skill sets. Some are more operational, some are more strategic, or they have, there are various, completely different profiles and portfolios. At the same time, good leadership does have constants, so somebody's going to be a good leader with, various qualities or what have you. So I think that kind of translates across the sectors, just like functions translate well across the sectors. An HR director or a chief finance officer, I guess, shares a lot of the same preferable qualities, no matter the sector. So there is that side to it. But at the same time, yes, you really have to learn the sectors, and that takes time, as we came to before. So for me to kind of develop my career in this area, I'll have to have, you move up in your career, don't you? And you develop in your career also based on the time that you also based on the time that you spend in the sector, so that you can learn and gain that kind of experience too. So yeah, basically, as well as originally life sciences and biotech and what have you, I'm now, I've gained a lot more insight and knowledge into the public sector, especially the NHS and higher education. Obviously, I was working in higher education, so I already had prior knowledge of that. But yeah, definitely, and that's part of the fun, really, is knowing a sector and knowing an industry.
I mean, it's going to be fabulous for your networking, isn't it?
Yeah,
You're going to be like, hey, remember me? I got you this job. Have you got any jobs for me?
Oh yeah, good point.
So I'm trying to think of something to kind of, because I think we've got plenty of material there now. Trying to think of something to kind of wind it up. Do you feel like there's anything I've not touched on? Anything we've not sort of covered? I mean, one area I want to kind of ask people about more is unions. And not necessarily like, why aren't you in a union? But like, just to see. So the main reason that people aren't in unions is no one's ever asked them. So have you ever been in a union? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's the kind of role that would necessarily need it, but you never know. And if you haven't, why haven't you? I can phrase that better, but there's the question for now.
Sure. So I haven't been in a union before. And the sole reason, I suppose, is that I haven't considered it because I haven't been asked. So my apologies if my answer is a little short and dull.
That's a good answer. I mean, it is like the main reason is that people aren't asked.
I can talk about pregnancy and work.
Oh, yes. Let's do that.
Yeah. So this is something I didn't realize. As I say, I'm pregnant with a first child, and that's not to imply that I'll necessarily have any more. It's just that, yeah, this is a new thing for me.
New experience.
Very new experience. It's interesting. I know that different women react differently to pregnancy and have different sort of experiences, but across the board, I think, there are mappable, identifiable kind of trimesters and the symptoms that come with them. And definitely working in a full-time job, mine is actually a seated job the majority of the time. Obviously I get up and go for a run, or I do things with my time to make sure that I'm mobile, but it is a seated job, so I don't know what it would be like for other people in other positions. But the first trimester is very tough. You are absolutely exhausted, and nauseous. There are certain people who, sick all the time and things. And it's also during that first 12 weeks that a lot of the time you're not disclosing to anybody that you're pregnant either until that 12-week scan. So yeah, that's something I've sort of been through recently, just thinking, gosh, it's tough. I've heard stories of people napping throughout the day, or, going from one meeting to a nap to another meeting so I managed to work fine throughout the first trimester, but it was definitely tough. And I was actually glad that my role and my workload happened to take a bit of a natural sort of, not dip, but if it had been as hectic during my first trimester pregnancy as it has been in the second one, I don't know how I would have coped. Whereas it just so happens that I've been rammed with work when my energy levels are back, and I'm kind of so that's just something interesting to note, I think. I was going down to London, which was, I don't know, I think the train journeys were quite tough. She felt so nauseated, and then I was getting to my hotel and just sleeping from kind of 8:30, So I just think it's something interesting to mention as an aspect of work, which I guess, quite obviously plenty of women, aren't pregnant, but, it does happen to obviously quite a few. And it's just interesting because it is quite tough. And at the same time, the toughest part is when you're not really telling anyone yet. You have to sort of suffer in silence.
It is a weird area. So we can kind of link this back to the sort of well-being thing, but I saw a thing on LinkedIn today. Yeah, again, to do with wellness. I keep losing my train of thought. So the question was, so it was a question on LinkedIn, and they were like, does your boss actually, care about your health along these workplace well-being sort of things? And it's interesting how, to a degree, they kind of, there are certain things that are chosen of like, we want to look after your well-being in this area, but then in other areas, it kind of gets ignored, like I would imagine the attitude to that sort of, if it is the first 12 weeks and you're not telling people, and it's like, oh, they're off work or they're in late, or, everything's kind of going wrong. There should be, there should be more support there for that period of time. I think the well-being thing is very much geared towards, basically, we want you to smile at work while you're working, rather than like, we want you to be healthy enough to turn up and do the job, basically. But yeah, do you feel that there's like, should there be more support? Should you be able to work less? Like, what would you change work-wise in terms of the pregnancy? Like, would you want to sort of ease down hours earlier, or
No, I mean, I'm fine with it, but I think it would depend on who you speak to and what they do. So there definitely should be things in place. But then if somebody isn't disclosing the pregnancy, then the company can't do anything, I guess. So you could, you could argue that. I'm sure plenty of companies are mindful of it, but then I'm sure plenty are not. It's one of those. I think it must be so dependent on somebody's situation. I mean, the actual sort of parental allowance for when people are actually on leave with the child, I mean, maybe that probably ought to be looked into, because looking at, the amount, it's not very livable. I mean, I don't know how political or critical this podcast is supposed to get, but that's probably were I to be influencing policy or entering into government in that sort of capacity, that's something I would probably want to look into and change. But then again, as you said, in relation to, was it probably UBI or whatever, it's all very well saying these things, and as much as most people probably agree, it's how do you actually implement them? How do you actually fund increases in parental support? So you could be living in countries where so it comes back again. It all comes back to gratitude for what you have. But yeah, I think there are plenty of things that are worth picking apart and perhaps bringing about change in regard to pregnancy and maternity and parental leave. I mean, thankfully, this day and age as well, there's shared parental leave, which my partner and I are planning to do. So I think things are improving, very much so.
Good. Are you kind of looking forward to the maternity leave, or are you dreading it at all?
No, I'm looking forward to
I can't work now when I've got to actually have this baby now.
Yeah. No, I think it'll be fun. I'm really, really excited. I'm really excited. I'm kind of over the moon, as my partner. So yeah, definitely wouldn't change anything at all. Really looking forward to it. But it's such an unknown quantity. I can't even imagine. It's funny enough, kind of feeling a child like moving inside. I don't know what it's going to be like when it's here in the house. It's going to be, yeah.
But fun.
Yeah.
I keep saying I'm going to get into the practice of kind of making notes as I'm doing this, so I can refer back. But the thing is, I can cut all of this out as well. So there's only you that sees it with me faffing about.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I don't think it looks that bad.
That's fine.
I think we've covered a fair bit there. I think we've got some good stuff in that.
Yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot.
Yeah, and that, like, as well, you can listen back to this in a year, 2 years time, and go, oh, I remember that. I remember how different my life was then.
Oh no, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I actually hosted a podcast and a radio show in York that were all kind of centered around arts, either people. So I'd interview people who kind of owned galleries or were artists or a bit of both, or curators or things like that. And I really enjoyed that. I sort of missed that sort of thing. It's nice, especially creating your own show or your own podcast like you've done. There's something so nice about that. But I think even listening back to stuff like that as a host, it's kind of, oh yeah, life was very different then. I hadn't even gone into this line of work at that point, and it was kind of around the corner, but I didn't know it yet. And no, it is really interesting. But I think you were mentioning my hobbies or side projects or what have you, in addition to work, and I think it is really the creative aspect of it that even if you're part of a team, some projects are solo projects, like I guess your podcast, or writing a novel, but, a band. So, there are more of us, not a huge number, but, that's a collaborative, I think ultimately, maybe it gives you also certain differing levels of not control, but kind of ownership and
Mm.
authorship.
Yeah.
Because in my job, yeah, I really enjoy it, like being in a defined role, like
Mm.
that I'm on a, trajectory towards other positions and kind of growing. I like all that. But at the same time, that sort of is what it is. You're in a bigger corporation, you're in your kind of role that's dependent on this greater machine
Mm.
and interactions with other people. And yes, you're responsible for what you're doing and you can do the best that you can. And that's great.
Mm.
And, you get a lot of satisfaction from that. But I think with these other projects, there are varying levels to which you are it, the master of them.
Mm.
Writing a novel, that's you.
Mm.
In a band, it's a few of you, or a larger community. Yeah. But I suppose that's the reason a lot of people really like being self-employed. I mean, how many people go on about how they love being self-employed? That's probably for that reason. So maybe way down the line, maybe starting my own sort of firm or being self-employed might be something I would enjoy, because then I guess you are kind of the creative master
Yeah.
of it.
Thank you again to Claudia for being my guest. Thanks again to all my guests. And thanks to you for listening. So before we go into the static outro, I just want to say that it's been really hard for me putting this episode out. I had 3 days of no listeners last week. Don't know why, but it just topped off a bunch of other things that were bumming me out, and it all just makes me wonder why I'm bothering with this and whether there's ever going to be any real audience for it. I know now this show will never make me any money, and I'm not sure that it's really doing me much good even as content marketing. I'm doing this podcast for me ultimately, but quite often I don't care about it at all, because why should I? It's probably not interesting to anyone else, and it seems it's not something people really want or are bothered for. So I really had to bully myself into putting this out today. Anyway, I have a couple of interviews left to go, which I will put out, and maybe 1 or 2 more interviews that I have booked in to record at the moment. But if I can't pass 1,000 downloads by the end of next month, then I think I'm really going to have a rethink about the whole show. Maybe the show needs to be subscriber only, be behind a paywall or something else. But it needs to be doing something for me other than just being a thing for me to do, a thing I need to tell myself I have to do because I'm not looking forward to doing it, because the only person I know I'm doing it for is myself. And so I don't care because I don't need to. Maybe it just needs winding up as a bad idea. I don't know. I mean, it is empirically a bad idea, and I can only extrapolate that lack of value I've failed to create for myself out to everybody else in Leeds. So, if anyone has anything good to say about this show or this project, now's really the time to let me know. Next week I will be speaking to Anne from Cards or Die, so please come back for that, and hopefully I'll feel a whole lot better about myself and my stupid ideas by then. If you're listening to this, I assume you have some connection to Leeds, like living here or being from here. If you're such a person in Leeds or from Leeds and you haven't done your recording for working hours yet, then don't wait. Email me right now. Right now. Quick, get a pen. workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Let's arrange some time for us to record your working hours interview. If you fancy being my guest, put guest in the subject of your email and add a short bio and some suggestions of your availability. If you want to be on working hours, we will need a 2-hour window in which to record. I can record in your work time or during your downtime. I have been recording interviews over Zoom for over a year, but I can record offline too. You can appear on working hours anonymously, or you can promote yourself and or your company or your brand. Cleaner or owner, what is your experience? How do you feel about work? What do you like and not like? What do you do, Leeds? Be a part of local history, have your voice heard, share your wisdom, give us the inside skinny. This is your show, Leeds. It's all about what you make of yourself. Do you know what you're doing? If you do, then come and tell me about it. Come on, even if you don't. Email me right now. Get that pen, workinghourspod@western-studios.com. If you're allowed to, that is. If you're not allowed to, then tell me why not. If you and your business aren't ashamed of what you do, then let's hear about it. What good are you doing the rest of us? Are you socially useful? Am I? Is this? Email me right now. Get that pen. workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Send me feedback, questions, comments, and queries about working hours. What is happening, Leeds? Follow this show on Twitter at Working Hours 3 and on Instagram at Working Hours Pod Leeds to find out when episodes are being released, or use the hashtag Working Hours Pod to find me on either. I'm also on Facebook, but I hate it there. I'm also on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Simon-Treen, or you can go to my company page, which is linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. If you want to make a podcast in Leeds, whether it's for a cause, a publicity campaign, a product promotion, and or your passion projects, then get in touch with Western Studios for support, advice, and guidance on anything podcasts. At Western Studios, you can work with a real loiner who is actually in Leeds, that you can actually work with on making podcast content. So don't wade through articles and videos and podcasts about how to make podcasts. Western Studios can just make your podcast with you or even for you. Western Studios can take on your podcast admin, recording, editing, transcription, whatever. Tell me about it. I really want to hear from other failed screenwriters such as myself to look at making your material as audio content. So if you have an old script hanging around, and again you are Leeds based, then get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Ditto to performers and actors who might be interested in doing voice work. Got an inkling that you'd like a podcast but you don't know where to start? Then hit me up at makemypodcast@western-studios.com and we'll start making your podcast. The first hour of consultation and pre-production will be free for you, so get in touch and let's have a chat. Save the hassle, save the headache, and make your podcast with a Leeds-based, in real-life podcast producer, me, at Western Studios Leeds. Once again, please let Working Hours get big and strong by joining its Patreon. Support Working Hours by becoming a champion on Patreon for £1 a month. You can also chat to me about the show, and God, do I need to find someone to talk to about this. Go to patreon.com/Working Hours Pod right now and sign up, please. Please remember to like, share, follow, and subscribe to this show. Every little bit helps. Tell your gran, tell your housekeeper, tell your gardener, tell your parole officer, tell your boss, tell Leeds, and I'll see thee next time. Working Hours is presented, edited and recorded by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org.